All right. I think we got Ross Jackson on now, if I'm not mistaken. Is that you, Ross? Good morning, man. How are you?
Hey, buddy. Doing great. Thanks so much, man. How you holding up?
Good, man. Good. Yesterday morning, I was not holding up well. It was not a good morning. Everyone was angry. Everyone was livid. Let me ask you that. You know, there's something nice about being in this line of work I'm in that it allows me to sort of be over the top at times. I try to be objective. At no point this season have I, at least when the Saints started playing poorly, have I tried to sugarcoat it in any way. But I can kind of come on and yell and be mad with everyone. And, you know, you're not afforded that kind of luxury in your line of work. But I do know you grew up, you know, Ross, I mean, if I'm speaking out of turn, you could tell me. But I feel like there is some Saints fandom, you know, that's in there with you. It's you want the team to do well, but there's also a decorum, and you got to sort of keep it objective. But objectively, they're bad right now. So how do you weigh, or how do you balance sort of the fan in you, but also the journalist in you when you're covering this football team?
Yeah, I think it's a two-step process. I think the first part of it is that you always try to be objective, and you always try to, you know, be honest about where the team is. But under every circumstance, I still have no problem taking the time to look at, okay, the team is bad, the team's not playing well, the team is struggling. Here's the next step. Here's how they get better. Here's what they can be doing differently. Here's what they can be doing more of. Here's what would work. Here's what would help. Here are all those things. And so always just sort of being willing to take things like an extra step to kind of evaluate not just where they are and how they're currently performing, but how can they do better? How can they be better? Everything. And I think that that's my sort of portion that I use to make sure that I'm serving not only the fan of myself, but the fan that's also, you know, that's listening or that's watching.
Right.
Is to let everyone know that, you know, yes, they played poorly. They're not playing well. Here's what they could do to move forward. If they do this, then maybe they'll be better. If they don't do this, then they'll continue to have, you know, they'll continue to see the issues. And I think that it's something that provides people with what they need to sort of be the smarter fan, to be able to, you know, understand why. You know, I think everybody's kind of understands why it's frustrating when you have, you know, you hear the same things every week. Oh, we got to stop turning the ball over. We got to convert on third downs. We got to be better in the red zone. But then to understand like why that's so frustrating and why that's continuously an issue, I think that's that next step that I really enjoy providing.
Ross Jackson, our guest. Well, it feels like the next step has been there for a while, and the Saints just haven't taken it. I mean, I think under Sean Payton, there were a lot of seasons, Ross, where we saw the team come out and they were not the best version of themselves. I mean, it was really most seasons, whether they started 0-1, 0-2, 1-0, 2-0, 1-1, whatever. And then they'd get to October, and, man, they would start rolling, you know. And you would see the growth. You would see, okay, you know, everyone teams aren't as physical in training camp. You know, it's preseason. A lot of stuff's different than it used to be. It takes teams a little while to figure things out. And for the Saints, it just never has happened. This season's, the 2022 Saints, it feels like it's never really happened in a lot of these areas. They've never taken that next step that you've, you know, pointed out. Maybe in a few areas here or there, but it seems like a lot of the big issues that have plagued this team have done so throughout the entire season. And that's why, you know, when Dennis Allen says, you know, we got to get it cleaned up, everyone's like, dude, it's December, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, you know, even they come out. I mean, you know, Andy Dalton came out this past week in Tampa when we spoke to him after the game, and he said, yeah, I kind of feel like a broken record up here talking about, you know, the same things each week. And I think that, you know, I remember that narrative was kind of present at first at the beginning of the season after the Carolina game, going into the London game against the Vikings, where folks said, hey, look, the Saints always start slow in September. They might get better in October. It's what we've always seen from them. And, you know, the one thing that I think a lot of us kind of said in response to that was, well, you know, those were Sean Payton's New Orleans Saints. These aren't Sean Payton's New Orleans Saints. As much as continuity was a big part of the factor, and a big part of the line of decision making that the organization made, these aren't that team. And it's not, in my opinion, I think it wasn't fair to sort of like look at them and say, okay, well, because Sean Payton's team did X and this team will do Y. There's no real connection between the two. And so it was one of those things to where, you kind of watch it and then you went, okay, well, the only thing you can do now is wait and see. Can they make the improvements? Can they take the next step? And to your point, there are some places where they've made the improvements. There are some places where they haven't. And there are also places where they make the improvement for a week and then go back to sort of, the big issues the following week. I think procedural penalties is a good example of that. False starts, 12 men in the huddle was a big one this week. Things like that end up sort of shooting themselves in the foot, killing their own momentum, things like that. I mean, we've seen the Saints lose to themselves more than we've seen them lose to other teams so far this season, and I think that's been a big issue for them. And so whether that's a coaching thing, whether that's a discipline thing, whether that's an execution thing, it all comes down to the same sort of factor, which is, you've got to be able to execute better, and you've got to be able to be able to make these plays out on the field. I mean, 3 major drops in this past game against Tampa Bay Buccaneers that factored in, not being able to finish in the red zone factored in. They created turnovers, actually generated 2 turnovers in the Sean Payton era. I think he's only got 4 losses in which, the Saints generated 4 turnovers and lost the game. For the most part, those were wins. And so it was a little bit uncharacteristic to see a team force 2 turnovers, win the turnover margin by 2 because they didn't turn the ball over themselves and then still find a way to end up losing that game, and they lost it in a pretty brutal fashion.
Yeah, no doubt. Ross Jackson, our guest. I want to ask you about, I think, a significant injury that a lot of us talked about when it happened, but it hasn't. It's not one of these ones brought up week to week. You're not getting shots of him on the sideline like you are Marshawn Lattimore. But when you look at the Saints, when you look at these Saints games this year, when they've played well, which has been very sporadic, honestly. I mean, the Las Vegas game, it's like, what? Like, how did that happen? But it did, and they were dominant on that day. And one of the reasons they were dominant, and one of the things they did in the win over Seattle, was they ran the ball, and they ran the ball well, and they ran the ball with a lot of power rushing plays. And Erik McCoy, when he was in the lineup, I want to say the Saints averaged between 6 and 7 yards a carry on power runs, if I'm not mistaken. And since he's been hurt, I don't have the number in front of me. It's like maybe 2.5. I mean, a significant drop, and that's not just a coincidence. I mean, he is, I think, the best player on the team that's never been a Pro Bowler. And his injury, again, not one of those ones. And I talked about it a little bit early in the season with Andrews Pete. I think they missed him, but they're missing McCoy more. It's night and day. It's not just the opponent. San Francisco's run defense is great. I get it. It's best in the league, all this stuff. It's not just the opponent, guys. Not having Erik McCoy has probably been the most significant injury that's talked about the least for this football team right now, because they just can't run the football right now without him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because, I think part of the thing that, a lot of Saints fans, a lot of the question marks that have come up is the utilization of Alvin Kamara, not necessarily utilizing him in space, utilizing him in the power run game more. And those questions weren't really being asked early on in the season because, well, it was working. Now you're seeing the questions that are being asked about it because of the fact that, like, it isn't working at this point. And so the difference is Erik McCoy. And we've now seen the Saints play 3 different players at center because Cesar Ruiz took over at center last week as opposed to them utilizing Josh Andrews, which had been the way that they were going. One of the reasons why the Saints have struggled so much in the run game, particularly up the middle, is A, you're missing your best player when it comes to your interior offensive line push, and B, because of that, you're also not seeing a lot of these offensive linemen climbing to the second level. When you think about Erik McCoy and what makes him special, what do you think about? You think about the way that he gets downfield. You think about the Green Bay game where he was, 40 yards downfield up ahead of Alvin Kamara, throwing blocks down near the goal line, things like that. Like that's what you're missing in this offense's run game, and really their screen game, and their short passing / run game as a whole. Because as we know, the New Orleans Saints utilize the short passing game as sort of an extension of the run game. So I think that, you're seeing Erik McCoy's absence impact the Saints not just in that power run game, especially in the power run game. But it's also having impacts outside of that as well. And it's not an easy that's not an easy thing to make up for. I mean, that's a very, very important position, particularly to this New Orleans Saints team. And the other thing that it, impacts is protections. It impacts, protection calls, pre-snap, all of that, because Erik McCoy helps out with all that. This isn't the New Orleans Saints team of the past that, the quarterback handles all of those calls. That's now a joint effort, and Erik McCoy is a big part of that.
He's severely missed right now, and I think it's just the nature of old linemen. I mean, and particularly interior offensive linemen. If it's a right or left, like if Ramczyk was missing, I feel like fans would be talking about it more. But McCoy's not there, and it's not. I mean, it's just, I don't know what it is. The odd thing is, if you're a player, good or not, that sometimes draws the ire of fans, then they notice more when you're gone. And Andrus Peat, I think, is unfairly at times drawn the ire of fans. Other times, sometimes justifiable. But overall, he's much better than what fans would lead you to believe. But when he's not in there, they talk about that more. It's just a weird thing. Like Ruiz. Whenever he's had a great season. He's been one of the bright spots. But prior to this, he struggled in his first few years. And I'm glad he's not in there. Whatever, all the different stereotypical stuff you hear. With McCoy, it's like, hey, he's really good. He's solid. He gets hurt. Oh, they're going to miss him. And then, like, crickets. And I'm like, my God, this team misses him right now. Right. Why aren't more folks talking about it?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to where, he's obviously an important player, a very important player to what the New Orleans Saints do and what their identity is supposed to be. But when you think about it, fans don't mention him by name, but they mention all of the symptoms that are coming from him not being there, the lack of a power run game, the lack of being able to get that second-level protection, the lack of being able to break the big runs, the lack of getting Alvin Kamara out in space with lead blockers and a screen, protection issues, protection call issues, things like that. All of those things are sort of symptoms to Erik McCoy not being there, but you don't really hear a lot from, and I think it goes beyond fans, too. Like, to your point, you're not seeing the sideline shots of Erik McCoy. Right, you don't hear it as much from a national media perspective either of how big a loss a center is and how hard that is to find. The fact that the Saints have gone center to center to center and have done a great job there, dating back to pre-Max Unger. I mean, you can look at guys like even interior offensive linemen beyond that, Brian De La Fuente, stuff like that. Like the Saints that really have done a phenomenal job going from great center to great center to great center. Teams don't usually do that. This is really kind of unique for the New Orleans Saints, and now you're seeing what could have been had the Saints not been able to make those leaps from center to center to center here over the course of the past few seasons.
Yeah. Aside from anger management issues, Olin Kreutz, who grabbed Drew Brees in a locker room in a team meeting once and was quickly waived. Aside from him, and he's punching members of the media. You can look it up. I think he needs some. He does get therapy. I think he might need some more. But aside from that experiment that didn't work, they've had really great play at that position for many years, and they're missing him right now.
Yeah, it's funny the reputation that Olin Kreutz didn't create that Kyle Turley did get. Even though Kyle Turley, who was very animated on the field and everything, and of course had his moments on the field, he didn't grab a quarterback during a team.
No, he would grab someone else, right? And Kreutz had come from a different team, and he didn't fit in the locker room, and it was not good. And Turley, he was around it. I mean, he was just a rock star when he was there. He was around at a time where you didn't have the. They had won one playoff game ever, and he was the guy that got on. He was a lot like, I mean, not as far as player goes, very different, but that C.J. Gardner-Johnson, like every other team hates him, but we love him type of player. That was Kyle Turley back in the day. And then when the team would struggle, he'd maybe call a few players out in a certain way, and then they'd get mad. And then suddenly when things got a little weird and awkward, they moved on from him. I mean, there's some similarities there. Now, Gardner-Johnson is a lot younger, and, granted he's hurt right now, but he went to Philly and is having a great year. And it's kind of just one of the many outlier things this season, Ross, that I think has fans upset, right? Oh, you don't have a first-round pick right now. And, you let that guy go, and you didn't get much back, and he's doing this and he's doing that. And I think there was this, because the NFC South is historically bad, there was that sense of, they can still compete. It's that bad. Just win Monday night, go into the bye. Now that they've lost, like, I don't know if you heard the caller, the listener that called before I brought you on, but I think a lot of the focus is now from a lot of fans already just shifted to the offseason. And that's a shame because you're in December. But that's where it is. How much coverage, how much of your inbox now is about, will this guy be back or that guy be back? How much of it now is just about not the current team as much as kind of looking ahead to next season or the offseason, rather?
Yeah, I'd say I'm doing about I'm going to be doing about 50-50 here moving forward. Basically, what I'm going to start doing is, just particularly with the podcast, like with Locked On Saints being the way that it is, daily content, I'm just going to shift to doing 2 episodes a day. And
wow.
Have like
the man works nonstop, ladies and gentlemen. Holy cow.
And so effectively I'll go to doing a present series and a future series, to where, the present series is going to continue to sort of be the usual in-season cadence of, here's all the, analytics and film breakdown from the game before. Here's kind of the crossover episode with, part of Locked On Family from the upcoming opposing team. Here's how the Saints can win this game, things like that. Still kind of, having those types of conversations, not passing up on those conversations, but then also, a second episode that'll come out, the same day that says, okay, let's take a look at what it would take for the Saints to get a Hendon Hooker, who are some of, is Hendon Hooker still worth, taking taking a flyer on despite his injury and his age, who are some of the free agent quarterbacks the Saints can go after? What do you do in terms of free agents that you must keep, free agents that you should let walk, things like that. So we'll kind of go 50-50, but it'll more kind of be like 100%, because instead of me dividing the work that I'm currently doing, I'll just double the work and make sure that people are getting what it is they're looking for. Because I do think that it's important. Like it's a weird thing for Saints fans right now to see their season effectively end before Christmas. This might be the earliest offseason we've seen. This is the earliest offseason we've seen in New Orleans since maybe the 2016 years.
Yeah.
And even those, like some of those even kind of ran a little bit later into the season
Yeah. You're right. So, it was, it was different in that. I think for a lot of fans, you'd look at the cap, you'd look at how the Saints sort of address that and, push stuff back and try to acquire and try to, quote, win now. And they were able to do it the last 5 years. Now they're assured their first losing season since 2016. And I think when you add the losing, the lack of a draft pick in the first round currently, and, that reality of, boy, Drew Brees, I know it's been a few years, but he's gone. John Payton's gone. I think it's the reality of, okay, now it's a bad football team right now. And they've got some cap issues they have to work out, and they don't have the first round. It's sort of a culmination of all that when you have the moment like you had Monday night, it makes it that much more, I pardon the metaphor, but a kick in the nuts. Like it's like the combination of all of it. But let me close with this. Ross Jackson, our guest, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. Follow him, host of the Locked On Saints podcast, contributor at the Saints Wire, Pro Football Writers Association member. The caller mentioned a couple of names. He said, next season, Davenport, Matthew, Jordan. I said, no, I don't think Davenport's back. I said, Matthew's interesting. I think they'll approach Jordan with, hey, let's mess with your contract a little bit. That was my take on it, but I told him I'd ask you about it. So give us your thoughts on those 3 players, then we'll let you go.
Yeah, I agreed with you on the Cam Jordan part. I think that there's, maybe the most likely thing, you're talking about a $13.9 million base salary going into next year. So you probably go to him, restructure at the very least, right? The easiest thing is that you go to him, you restructure, you drop his salary cap to, it'll be around $1.2 million. So you're saving somewhere around $12.7 million in that case. Not to throw a bunch of numbers out on the radio. I know that's a cardinal sin, but you can save a chunk of money when you do that. The issue then is just that you're still pushing money back because you've got money that you're paying Cam Jordan right now all the way through 2026. Now, it doesn't mean that he'll be on the books through 2026. It's just that when you cut him, those things will, or when he retires, or whatever however his time does end, is he's 33 years old right now. You're getting to a point now to where, that money will accelerate all into one season. So as you're kicking things back, you do run the risk of, as soon as the contract is finished in whichever fashion it finishes, that all of it kind of accelerates and you have to pay it off. Unless you make it a post-June 1 transaction, then you can kind of cut it in half. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of ways for them to finesse. The other thing that they can do is go to him and literally renegotiate his contract as opposed to restructure. So actually work with him around how they drop his salary cap number, things like that. I would expect that they'll do that with Michael Thomas. I don't know that you do that with Cameron Jordan, though. Cameron Jordan's such a history player. He's, 2 sacks, 3 sacks away from that, the franchise sack record, all those other things. So I think you probably renegotiate or restructure with him and then knock those down. But don't be surprised if they go to Michael Thomas and actually physically, work with him to renegotiate his contract. I think Tyrann Mathieu on the roster next season. He's got a $14.6 million cap hit, and he already has a potential out built into his contract after next year. And so I think that you very likely give him another year at 31 in the system and, see what you have in him, and then you make the decision about whether or not you want to, you can kind of guarantee his 2024 after the fact, or you can move on from him. He's got a roster bonus that would be a part of that, everything there. But I think the real decision around Tyrann Mathieu is very likely made in 2024 unless he makes a decision for you. Like, let's say that he, surprise retires, kind of like what we've seen. I mean, we've seen it in each of the past 3 seasons in the secondary. Patrick Robinson, Malcolm Jenkins. Will it happen again in 2023's offseason? We'll find out. You know what I mean? So that would be the one to watch out for. But outside of that, I think he's on your roster next year. And I don't think that that's a bad thing for this New Orleans Saints team either. I think the safety position is one that doesn't exist within the broadcast view, and so you're either up or down in terms of your perception on them, and that's okay. But I think that consistent play at that position is so hard to find that when you have somebody that has a skill set that is unique, like Tyrann Mathieu, you give him a second year.
He is going to be churning out 2 podcasts a day now as the focus in the offseason heightens, but the regular season is still at play. He's a great follow on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. He's a great guy, and he didn't ascend from, working on Broadway to, big media personality and a contributor in New Orleans in a short period of time by sitting on his rear end. He's one of the hardest working guys out there. It's a fact, Ross. Well, you are. Well, yeah, I mean, technically, you're right. You never stand up. You're not one of I'm not either. You're not one of those guys I see folks that stand up like they have that heightened table at the computer. I'm like, I don't think I could do that. I don't know.
Yeah, I've thought about giving it a shot. Maybe 2 episodes a day will get me there. We'll find out. But as of right now, yeah, I'm still enjoying sitting on my rear end for a little while.
There you go, man. Well, I working hard while sitting on your rear end, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Man, look, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you were traveling yesterday from Tampa. I know it's early, but all the best, man. Continued success, and I'm sure we'll talk to you down the line.
Absolutely, brother. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much for the flexibility and everything. And as always, man, it's a pleasure to get to sit down and speak with you. So thanks so much for taking the time to have me on.
You got it, man. Awesome stuff. We'll talk to you later. That is Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, host of Locked On Saints. That podcast, check it out. He's going to be putting out 2 a day. That ain't easy. And let me tell you something, man. Everyone's, you talk about sports, you could do that. Putting hours of content out every single day. Whenever you're in a lot of ways, look, some places you have multiple people, you have teams, you have a lot of different stuff. Ross is running all that on his own. A lot of radio shows. You got producers. You got people that are doing stuff on social for you, all this other stuff. Yeah. Great Scott show. As far as all the stuff off the air, it's me. That's it.